Hello, believers, non believers, and everyone in between. You're listening to Stories with Sapphire. I am Sapphire Sandalo. Now get cozy and open your mind because it's story time. Ghost Investigation. This is a chapter from Ghosts of Misawa Air Base by Christine M. Watts. A couple of weeks after the big quake, while my husband Rob was at work, he was talking with Staff Sergeant Mejia, who was a security troop. At some point, they got on the topic of the Star Channel, which was out of Hong Kong. Up until that time, the only channels available to us were the military's Far East network and a couple of local Japanese channels, which didn't always come in very clear. So, the addition of a small handful of new channels out of British-controlled Hong Kong had created quite the buzz. Star played shows and movies in English, and recently there had been a television series about true ghost stories. "Did you watch the latest episode?" Sergeant Mejia asked Rob. Rob told him that we had, and it had been a really good one. Mejia said, "That stuff just fascinates me. I could watch those shows over and over again and never get tired of them." Rob said, "Well, if you think those are interesting, you should see what happens at my place." Now he had Mejia's full attention. Rob told him everything that had been going on the past 2+ years in our apartment. Mejia couldn't believe what he was hearing, and he asked if he could come over to our home to see for himself. Rob told him that would be fine. When Sergeant Mejia came to our home a couple of days later on one of their days off, I was surprised. He was a very nice man, but he was so quiet that I had never even heard him talk before that day. Whenever I had said hi to him in passing while I was still in the Air Force, he would just simply nod in acknowledgement. The typically reserved security troop had come alive, talking very animatedly as he was excited to learn more about our ghosts. He kept looking all around and said that he could definitely feel something there. Mejia, with his eyes dancing, said, "Have you guys tried to get evidence of your ghosts yet?" Rob and I looked at each other because that was something we had not even considered. How the heck does the average Joe do something like that? I had watched Poltergeist as a preteen, but those investigators in the movie used fancy equipment and cameras. We had an old, big, bulky video camera that we had bought off a friend, but that was it. Sergeant Mejia said, "Do you have a tape recorder?" When we shook our heads no, he said, "Remember in that one episode of The Ghost Show recently where the people put out a voice-activated tape recorder? You should do something like that. Oh, and also spread powder or flour on the floor because the energy of the ghosts might make swirl patterns or something like that on it." So that was the beginning of our investigation to gather evidence of our ghosts. Before Mejia left, he and Rob snuck into the kids' room as Heather and Bobby slept and spread baking soda all over the carpet and the top of their dresser. By morning, there was no sign of any ghost disturbance or swirls within the powder. The only disturbance came from me as I grumbled loudly over the fact that I now had to vacuum all that mess up. At least the carpets were deodorized now. Rob and I headed to the BX a day or two later and bought a little handheld voice-activated tape recorder and a pack of the tiny cassette tapes it used. Back during those times, it was a fortune for us to spend on our very tight budget, but we figured it might be worth it if we could catch some audio proof of whomever had attached themselves to us. It was exciting that night to set the tape recorder up after we had put the babies down for the night. Rob held it up to his mouth and recorded himself giving the date in military jargon, 18 January 95. Then he placed the recorder on top of Heather and Bobby's dresser, and we quietly moved out of the room. Out of all the areas of our apartment that we had experienced things, it was the kids' bedroom that seemed to be the most active, with the toys always going off and the baby swing swaying. Rob went to work, and I went to bed. In the wee hours of the morning, I heard Bobby crying over the baby monitor. Exhausted, I groggily got out of bed and went into their room. Bobby was trying to pull himself half up using the bars of the crib, so I simply and quietly put my hand on his head and stroked his hair until he sank back down and closed his eyes. Then I dragged myself back to bed and didn't wake up again until I heard Heather, around 6 a.m, playing with toys in her bed. I had forgotten all about the tape recorder until I was getting the kids dressed later that morning and saw it on the dresser. I picked it up and noticed some of the cassette tape had been used. Excited, I rewound it and then pressed play. Rob's voice came over the recorder, giving the date, 18 January 95. Then the next thing to be heard was Bobby crying. Oh yeah, I sighed, talking out loud to myself, remembering that I had to get up in the middle of the night to soothe him. Well, crap, we're just striking out everywhere. When Rob came home, I told him all the recorder caught was Bobby crying. Rob said, well, maybe next time. We'll just keep putting it out and see what happens. He went to bed to get some much-needed rest. Hours later, I picked up the recorder again and decided to rewind it to get it ready to set out again later that night. When it rewound, it took just a split second to reach that beginning again. That's weird, I thought. I'm pretty sure that when I rewound it earlier that day, it had taken a lot longer than that. I had cut it off once I heard Bobby crying, thinking that's why the recorder had activated and that's all there was to it. Was there actually more that got recorded after that? With anticipation, I pressed play again. 18 January once again, 95. I heard Rob giving the date. Then I heard Bobby crying. Okay, yeah, I knew all that. Holding my breath, I waited to see what was coming next. The very next thing to come through was a loud bang, which was followed by a metallic ring, much like as if someone had hit metal upon a metal pole. My ears perked up as I heard shuffling of some sort. Then I almost dropped the recorder when a long, drawn-out male-sounding voice came over, sounding like it was speaking in slow motion. I could not make out what was being said. Holy cow. With shaking hands, I continued to hold the recorder when a second voice came in a similar, slow-motion, long drawn-out voice, but an octave or two lower. I was still unable to make out what was being said. I suddenly felt very vulnerable, as if someone was watching me. I looked all around and felt the charge in the air, but I couldn't tell if it was coming from my own fear or if the two ghosts haunting my apartment were currently present. There was a lot more banging, shuffling, movement, and other noises coming over the recorder. I heard the first long, drawn-out voice twice more, but still couldn't make out any words. Then I heard the metallic ring again, followed by some more bangs, and then silence. Pressing stop on the recorder, I was terrified, but yet the former cop in me kept pushing me to figure out what was being said. I happened to turn the tape recorder on its side, where the speed settings and such were, and then it hit me. Since the voices sounded like they were in slow motion, what would happen if I sped up the speed of the tape? I switched it to 2.4 times speed. When Rob's voice came on, it sounded like he had sucked helium.
18 January
Bobby's crying
95.
sounded like he was one of the chipmunks. Then, when the unknown voice came on, I had words for the first time. A deep female voice said,
Can mommy push you?
A child's voice responded,
Uh-huh.
Can mommy push you? What the heck does that mean? Then it hit me. The baby swing. Even with the woman's voice clear as day now, I still could not make out what she said the other 2 times she spoke. But what I could make out was enough for me. My kids have never called me mommy. It's always been mama. Even to this day, I've never referred to myself as mommy. I finally had evidence in my hands, and now I I had my answer to why that baby swing was always moving on its own. Jazzed up with both fear and excitement, I opened our bedroom door. I didn't want to wake up poor Rob since he needed his sleep, but I figured that if I called out to him and he happened to wake up, then I would tell him what happened. I called out. He didn't respond or stir. Dead to the world. Excuse the pun. Needing to tell someone, I immediately called my friend Sally next. I told her she needed to come over right away. She sort of huffed and said she was in the middle of getting everything together because they were moving. I told her, we caught the voices of our ghosts on a tape recorder. Her tone completely changed. She had sensed a presence in our home on multiple occasions and knew our story.
I'll be right over.
Sally was at my door within 3 minutes, out of breath. She must have run over to my cul-de-sac. She walked into the living room, and as we stood in the middle of the room, I handed her the recorder. I told her, what you're about to hear is played at normal speed. You're going to hear Rob first, then Bobby crying in his crib, and it's right after Bobby. She pressed play and listened to Rob and Bobby. When the bang and metallic ring came on, she just kind of shrugged at me like, this is the big deal you made me drop everything for? The second the long, drawn-out, deep, male-sounding voice came on, she screamed. She flung my tape recorder out of her hand, and I went diving for it to keep it from breaking. I missed, but thankfully it landed on the sectional. No, she shouted. No, 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 no. No, you have to listen to it with it sped up now, I insisted. Fuck that, Sally responded. I pressed play anyway, and now she could hear the woman's voice. Sally was shaking and told me to turn it off. She wrapped her arms around herself as if to protect herself, and she kept shaking her head. You need to get rid of that. That's evil shit. I just can't. I have to go. After that day, Sally never came back to our apartment. If she wanted to get together, I had to go to her house every single time. The closest she would get was the parking area in our cul-de-sac. When Rob woke up in the late afternoon for dinner and to get ready for his next shift, I told him what happened and played the recording for him at the varying speeds. Excited, he took it to work with him so he could show Sergeant Mejia. Mejia was thrilled. One of the CGs, Tsukiyama, was in the room when Rob had played the recorder for Mejia at the squadron. He heard Rob tell Sergeant Mejia, well, now we know they're American. Tsukiyama snorted and said in his limited English, how you know they American? Rob said, because they're speaking English. Tsukiyama snorted again. They could be Japanese. No, they're speaking English, Rob said. Do you speak Japanese? No. Then that way they speak English. You don't know Japanese. After daybreak, Sergeant Mejia got on one of the phones in the squadron and called the base mental health facility. When a woman came on the phone and inquired how she could help him, Mejia asked, yeah, hi, I was wondering if you have any parapsychologists on staff.
A para what?
The woman asked, confused. A parapsychologist?
Sir, I'm not sure what you mean.
Parapsychologist, Mejia said slowly, like he was talking to someone for whom English was not their first language.
Sir, I don't even know what that is.
The woman responded, now sounding very irritated. A parapsychologist, someone who studies the paranormal, ghosts. There was silence on the phone. Then the woman spoke again, now speaking to him slowly and cautiously, as if she had just discovered her first lunatic of her career.
Sir, are you seeing ghosts?
Mejia said, no. Mejia looked at Rob, knowing where this was going.
Sir, can I get your name, please?
Sergeant Mejia hung up the phone immediately. He took a second to take a breath, and then he and Rob both cracked up. That was a close call.